Hey folks, this is the one and only Warwolf howling out at ya. And folks, I'm here to talk about a little something that, well, I haven't talked about on this channel. Like, ever. But what am I here to talk about? The Legend of Zelda. Now, everybody has been talking about how great Tears of the Kingdom is. I'll be honest, I don't have the Nintendo Switch, so I have not played this yet. I have played demos of Breath of the Wild. They're not bad. I'm not a fan of the breakable weapons, but that's just me. But there is one thing that I am curious about, because I did watch a video earlier today, and there was a rather interesting question posed by this video, and it was quite simply, what do they do next? Now, to be fair, we just got Tears of the Kingdom released, so a lot of people would be wondering, why are we even talking about what's coming next? But I can almost see the reasoning behind it. When you get down to it, Tears of the Kingdom is a great follow-up to Breath of the Wild by all accounts, and it uses the same general map with only a few differences in the general things that you're doing, like creating new weapons or new vehicles or what have you. But then you've got to ask yourself, could they do another sequel that uses this same map? Theoretically, I think they could. However, there's one major question that still bugs me about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom combined. Where are they in the Zelda timeline? So, for those of you who do not know, there's effectively 3 different timelines to The Legend of Zelda. And all 3 of these timelines branch off from one game, Ocarina of Time. So, in Ocarina of Time, we know that there are times in the game where you travel between what would be the quote-unquote modern day of the events of the game, and then Link gets jumped 7 years into, theoretically, the future, where he has a more adult-sized body. He's around, 18 to 21 physically. I'm not exactly sure how old he's supposed to be in his child form, but I can't imagine him being any younger, theoretically, than 9 or 10. Because, if that's the case, then that is really disturbing. But when you get right down to it, there are 3 timelines that split off from this game. You have what's called the adult timeline, i.e., a split in history where the adult Link has these adventures in the future Hyrule, defeats Ganon, and he is sealed away, Ganon is. And then, a couple of 100 years later, because Link did not reincarnate in this timeline because he was sent back to the past, the gods effectively flood Hyrule. This is where we get Wind Waker from. Meanwhile, after being sent back to the past and closing the door of time, which effectively means travel between the 2 timelines is impossible, we then get a further split. In one split, Link is defeated by Ganon at some point, and basically we get the events of, apparently, A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, then the original Zelda, and the Adventure of Link. Meanwhile, in the child timeline where Link somehow manages to thwart Ganondorf's entire whole attempt at conquest and prevents the adult timeline from even happening, we then get Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, and maybe 1 or 2 others. Oh, I almost forgot. Apparently the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons are part of the child Link is defeated timeline. So, yeah, the Zelda timeline is confusing at best anyway. But then, like I said, we've got Wind Waker, then Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. And then we've got Hyrule Warriors, which is off somewhere in its own thing. And then, of course, we have Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I will admit, I have seen game theories, well, video on the idea that maybe Hyrule Warriors is the means by which all three of these Zelda timelines are collapsed into one future timeline, and that leads to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, at least it would explain how there are supposedly, like, all these different Easter eggs that are supposed to be from all three timelines, which wouldn't make sense, simply because, again, there are three different timelines and three different histories that you're dealing with here. Now, I don't think this is a Turn a Gundam situation, and I feel dirty even bringing up that series because I hate it. Because the idea behind Turn a Gundam is every single Gundam series somehow leads into that piece of crap show. I don't think this is quite that kind of a situation. Nintendo has flat out said that Hyrule Warriors isn't really part of the primary timelines at all. It's kind of off doing its own thing. And it's very possible that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom could be in the same situation. But let's say that that is the case. Where do they go with the next game? Now, this other video that I'm talking about, in fact, I just saw it today, suggested there are other ways you can go. Remastering older games. Now, a lot of these are being re-released via the Nintendo Switch Online. This includes Link's Awakening Remastered. I think the original Link's Awakening is available, as well as the Game Boy Color version, which I think was Link's Awakening DX. People have kind of ragged on The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds for being kind of a rehash of A Link to the Past. Although, if I'm remembering what I saw of the Zelda timeline recently, now, granted, this is from a Wikipedia article, so to be fair, I could be entirely wrong on this, but apparently, like, A Link Between Worlds takes place sometime just after Skyward Sword, but before Ocarina of Time. So, I don't know if I believe the idea that it's a rehash. Honestly, I think even the Minish Cap is somewhere in that section of the timeline just after Skyward Sword, but before Ocarina. I could be wrong here, and if I am, somebody please correct me in the comments. But there has been talk about what the next step is going to be for the Zelda games, because most of these other games are very traditional, even if they're not a top-down, semi-3D perspective. You look at Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, even Wind Waker, which I was not a fan of. I don't like that particular art style, but, you know, the game was very, poorly received at first, but it's kind of gained a lot more following and respect. And ironically enough, the game that I personally like, Twilight Princess, started out being very well received, but now has kind of gotten a lukewarm reception from the overall fandoms of Zelda. Now, I am going to say something straight up here. I have played Zelda 2. I have played A Link to the Past. I have played Ocarina of Time. I have played Twilight Princess. Of these games, the only two I've ever beaten are A Link to the Past's direct, I can't words here. I guess you would say their direct predecessor in the timeline would be Ocarina of Time, because this is literally what it's supposed to lead to. So A Link to the Past's direct predecessor, Ocarina of Time, I've beaten it. Twilight Princess, I've beaten it. That's it. I have not beaten any other version of Zelda. And I liked A Link to the Past, but I've never beaten it. Ever. All right? I've never beaten The Adventure of Link, which, ironically enough, I think that was the first ever Zelda game I ever played. But I never beat it. And probably never will. But I loved Twilight Princess, partly because I loved the art style, and partly because I liked the mechanic of turning into a wolf, and it was a very different take on Hyrule. Plus, I mean, Orden Forest seems to have replaced the Lost Woods. That's a whole other thing. Or at least I would have said so right up until you got into that forest temple, which I guess is technically part of the Lost Woods. It's a whole thing. Regardless, what is the next step for The Legend of Zelda is still a valid question. Now, with the Switch being a mixture of home console and handheld, and then of course you got the Switch Lite, which is a whole other thing. And like these rumors about potentially a second version of the Switch being put out, I don't know if I believe that yet. That's what I keep hearing. But I don't know if I believe that it's actually going to be a thing. So, The Legend of Zelda, they just got Tears of the Kingdom. It looks great. Although, again, I'm still not crazy about that cell shading thing. I like the art style of Twilight Princess. I'd love to see that come back. But without the cell shading, because again, that's basically what Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are, is basically more of a Twilight Princess art style, but with the cell shading. I'm not a fan of cell shading. Really not. Part of it is I just don't like the reminder of Wind Waker because I hated Wind Waker, and the other part of it is I just don't like the cell shading. It looks weird to me. Either way, I like that they have advanced stories for Zelda and Link. I like that, for once, you know, Zelda has a little bit more to do. I'm waiting to see at some point if we're going to get her as a playable character outside of Hyrule Warriors. I would love to see a complete gender flip where instead of it being that, you know, Link is out to rescue Zelda, let's have it literally be The Legend of Zelda, be about Zelda actually doing something, or even just gender swap the main characters, and instead of Zelda, we have like Zeldar or something. You know, and then like Link, I mean, you could still theoretically have his name be Link, but like spell it Lynk or something. I don't know. But like that would certainly at least be a little interesting. They tried to do something like that with Linkley. I don't know how you pronounce it. But she seemed a little ridiculous, and I didn't like the pigtails. No, I have not played Hyrule Warriors, but yes, I've seen videos of her. Anyway, they've got to do something in the near future to, like, go in a different direction. You can't really go Skyward Sword at this point because technically you've sort of done that a little bit with Tears of the Kingdom. And unless you're going to bring back Demise, which, I mean, theoretically they could. I mean, unless you're going to bring him back and really just bring an end to this cycle of reincarnation based on his hatred, like, they've got to find a new way to make this story work. Now, they've proven you can do stories that don't feature Ganon. I mean, they did it with Link's Awakening. This game was originally set to be a sequel to The Adventure of Link. This was supposed to be a direct sequel to Zelda 2. They decided to move it up in the timeline to be a sequel to A Link to the Past. Will this be where they need to go for future Zelda games? I don't know. I really don't know, and I'm not sure how to react to the idea that they could go back to a more traditional plot progression game rather than a true open world game like they've been doing with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I think they should keep the open world setup that they've got now, but again, I would love to see revisiting of some plots. Like, obviously this game is, you know, several hundred years before Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but I'd love to see an appearance by a latter-day member of the Twilight, because of course that was that was Midna's whole thing. I'd love to see the whole turn into a wolf bit come back. I'd love to see them maybe see what's going on with the Windfish, or, you know, any number of things that they could do, but get away from Ganon. I mean, yes, he's a staple of the franchise, but by the time of Zelda 2, Ganon was straight up killed. And they were generally making it seem as though he was not going to be able to come back without... I'm not exactly sure why Ganon would even have been able to come back if Zelda's would-be rescuer was killed in Zelda 2, but that's what they went with. But the idea basically was Link actually straight up killed him in the first Zelda game, and he stayed dead if you beat Zelda 2. And then, like I said, Link's Awakening was supposed to be a direct sequel to The Adventure of Link. So it was supposed to be a series that theoretically could have gone on without Ganon. But much like with the Castlevania series, they kept going further and further back in time. And I think, again, much like with Castlevania Lords of Shadow, which they had to set an entirely separate timeline up for this, I think they're going to have to move them forward in time rather than continuing to move back. Because you've already established where the story begins with Skyward Sword. You can't get any further back than that. They have to keep progressing forward, and I'm glad that it looks like they have. But it really feels to me like they need to just finally get away from Ganon. And I think part of this is just because, like, you can only have that curse of hatred last so long before eventually it has to run out of power. I don't care if this is like something from a Demon King, because I mean, even at this point, Ganon is called the Demon King at this point. Sometimes he's called the Demon Beast, sometimes he's called the Demon King, sometimes he's called Ganon, other times he's called Ganondorf. Just, like, I have to say, I'm trying to remember who put out this video. I think it was... I don't remember who it was that said this, but the video was called Let Goku Die, which is basically just like, move on from certain plot points. Goku, they tried to effectively, I think, kill him off twice according to the rumors about what was going on with Dragon Ball Z, where first the idea was he was supposed to die after the Namek Saga, having been the only one to reach Super Saiyan, but the editors and everybody over at Shonen Jump supposedly wouldn't let Toriyama do that, so he came back, and then he was supposed to die off again in the Cell games, and then Gohan was supposed to take over yet again, and again they just said, no, we want Goku. I get that you want to have Link fighting a familiar enemy. I get that. But eventually it's like, how many times can you do the same thing? Like, it's Ganon every time, and the whole thing is, Ganon is just effectively a sacrificial pawn for Demise's hatred. What happens if he decides to buck that curse? That'd be a storyline I'd like to see. Ganon basically says, screw this, I'm not going to be a pawn of this psycho anymore. Assuming he even knows about the curse. I don't think he does. But what if he decided, screw it. I'm not going to bother trying to conquer Hyrule. I don't give enough of a damn anymore because I keep failing at it. So what if he says, I'm not doing this anymore? Does the curse freak out and try to resurrect Demise? Could we then literally see Link, Zelda, and Ganon, the three holders of the Triforce's various parts, then fighting against Demise? I'd love to see it, because Lord only knows we've never seen that before. Ganon is playable as far as I've been led to understand in Hyrule Warriors. But, again, that's often its own thing and has nothing to do with the main series at all. Or even any of the three various timelines, of which we have no idea where Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom actually link up, if you'll pardon the pun. So, yeah, I mean, this is basically just one of those things where I want to know what you guys think about The Legend of Zelda and where they could go in the near future. And, you know, I want to know what you think we should see in new games. I get that we just got Tears of the Kingdom, and everybody is saying, well, why don't we just let this be good enough for now? And obviously it is, but Nintendo as a company can never really rest on its laurels, and we have to see what it's going to do next. We have to know what they want us to know that they're doing next. Will we get more traditional style Zelda games where it's plot progression based rather than open world based? Maybe. But until then, I still want to see what you guys think. I want to know what you guys would love to see in a future Zelda game. I, for one, like I said, I'd love to see them get away from Ganondorf, maybe bring back Demise, maybe introduce another new adversary. They did it with Link's Awakening. And, I mean, technically they did it even with A Link Between Worlds and the Minish Cap. And I think Four Swords Adventures had nothing to do with Ganon as the final boss. Give me more of that. Let me see more of that. Let me see a Zelda game where Link isn't just fighting the same bad guy over and over and over. This is part of the reason why I love the Lords of Shadow trilogy. Not only were you not fighting Dracula yet again, at least up until you get to Mirror of Fate, in the second game, technically, it's technically the third because you had Mirror of Fate, but then you got Lords of Shadow 2. But either way, in the second officially numbered game in the franchise, you play as Dracula. Which was completely unheard of at the time. And then you literally had the story where, not only did you get to play as Dracula, Dracula himself was a member of the Belmont family. Do something new, but familiar, all right? Give us something new, but that still gives us that familiar Zelda feel. Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, they gave us something new with the open world, but it's still Ganon. I want to fight somebody new from this franchise. Give us somebody new, or at least bring back Demise. Have Ganon throw off the shackles of the curse. Have Demise come back and be like, how dare you not be my pawn anymore? Do something! So, yeah, that's just the whole thing. I only have, this particular title card because I managed to pull it off a screen grab so that I made, for this particular video. But again, let me know what you think. I want to hear what you guys have to say about The Legend of Zelda going forward. At some point, I've got to get a Switch so I can actually play this game. But until then, speculation is always going to be my bread and butter for this kind of thing. And folks, before I end this video, yes, I know, I've been promising an anime review. I am writing a script for it. I'm getting the screenshots made. I'm going to try to get this done before the end of the month. I swear to God. Anyway, if you happen to like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It really helps out in the YouTube algorithm. Tell your friends, ask them to come take a look. And again, leave a comment. All of this helps with the YouTube algorithm because believe me, the YouTube algorithm will eat up our interesting videos all that much more quickly like a like. And if you don't know what a like is, you haven't played The Legend of Zelda. But again, hit like, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell. Turn on notifications, on your cell phone. Every little bit helps. Anyway, folks, this is Warwolf howling out at you. Peace!